everyone. So for today's card I'm actually going to do a bit of painting and this was inspired by some Aboriginal art that I saw when I was over in Australia recently. And so to begin this, what I'm going to do is prepare my cardstock with a gesso primer. And this is what artists use to prepare their canvases before they do any oil painting or acrylic painting. So it's a great way to prepare the cardstock to give it a good sort of tacky background for your acrylic paint to really stick to. But please remember to clean your paintbrushes out straight away after using it, otherwise they'll go solid as a rock and you'll never be able to use them again. You could just leave this to dry, you know, just naturally, leave it for an hour or so. But I force dried it with my heat gun because I was impatient and wanted to get started. And so I've just bought a couple of acrylic paints. I bought some black, some white, yellow and red for this particular job, but I also bought some blue as well, so I can effectively create any colour I want to quite cheaply without having to buy lots and lots of different colours. I can just mix them on a little palette. So for this particular design I wanted a black background, and just to note, you can buy black gesso, but I didn't have any and it was just cheaper to buy the acrylic paint. So I'm just kind of painting this on to create that black background, and again you could set this aside to dry or force dry it with a heat gun, whichever. But while that's drying, what I'm going to do now is create a little semicircle shape, and this is because the pattern I want to use is just like lots of little archways. You'll see just now in a minute. And so I just created this so I can use it as a template to draw around, so I know all those archways are going to be uniform. It just saves me having to kind of eyeball it, because it doesn't always look that great if you eyeball it, and I need it to be absolutely parallel when I've finished. And so here I'm just trimming this down just so it's in exactly half of the circle. So now what I'm doing is I'm just giving myself a baseline to work off. So just lightly drawn in pencil over my acrylic paint background. And here I'm just going to start drawing out those little archways that I talked about earlier. The paint was still very slightly tacky, so I had to be quite careful at this point. And now what I want to do is literally go over those archways with this red acrylic paint. Now, I don't pretend this is Aboriginal art by any stretch of the imagination. As I say, I was just inspired by it. It's got nothing to do with the Aboriginal culture at all. But yeah, I just really liked the paintings when I was over there, so I wanted to just have a go at doing something similar. I originally was going to just use the white acrylic paint, but I decided to make it just slightly off-white. And for that I used quite a bit of white paint and just a really tiny amount of yellow, because it goes quite a long way. And just mix that all up to make the off-white creamy sort of colour that you'll see on the end painting. And I'm just filling in all those spaces with dots. Some bigger dots, and then they go to smaller dots as you get sort of nearer the centre of each of the archways. I had great fun painting this actually. It was quite satisfying. And I just did the same on the top as well, above the arches. So that's my art finished for this card, and I have set that aside to dry naturally by itself. While I was doing that, I've got these chipboard letters. And I've already got out the ones I want. I'm going to spell out the word thanks. And what I'm doing here is just putting down some temporary adhesive. Excuse me. Putting down some temporary adhesive so I can adhere those letters down to my bit of scratch paper, so I can paint over them without getting, you know, a complete mess all over my craft desk. And I'm going back to that red acrylic paint just so everything sort of tones in on the finished card, and I'm literally just splotching it all over and making sure I go around the sides of the letters as well, so the chipboard doesn't show through on the sides of each of the 3D effect of the chipboard. And I'm force drying this, but again you could just leave it to dry naturally. And now I'm cutting down my artwork that I painted earlier. I had to be really careful with this because it's extremely thick. By the time you've got all those layers of gesso, paint and cardstock, it actually didn't cut particularly well. I didn't want to damage the paintwork by dragging my blade across it, so I just took that quite slowly. And that's ready to go on my card now. And here what I'm doing is I'm just sort of measuring out with my pencil how high I need this piece of cream cardstock to be. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. And then I'm just trimming that down using my guillotine. So I know that's exactly the right height for my letters to be placed onto. So here I'm just using my craft knife to just lift these letters off the paper because they're set quite solidly on there with all the acrylic paint. And now I'm just trimming, I have not stuck this bit of cardstock down, I'm just trimming it so I know it's the right width for the card. Because these letters are only just going to fit on there. And I wanted to make sure that they weren't going to hang over the edge or anything. So first what I've done is I've just laid them out above the bit of cardstock. So I know they are going to fit. And I have something to work to then. And I'm just going to stick them down one by one onto this bit of cardstock using just my PVA glue. I am a proper artist. I have paint all over my fingers. That's disgusting. Oh well, never mind. And now we get to put the card together. So just sort of vaguely laid it out so I know where everything wants to be placed. And I've just made a little mark on the base card so I know where the artwork's got to be put on for it all to sort of lay out properly. And I'm just adhering this with my tape runner. This card is going to go all the way to Australia, so I need it to be quite thin. So I'm not using any 3D stickers or anything like that on this card. And here I'm just using a line of glue to stick those bits of brown cardstock, the very thin bits of cardstock that I cut out earlier. And I just want one above and one below this piece of artwork. I used a bit too much glue on this actually, it kind of went everywhere. I always overestimate the amount of glue I need for these sorts of things. So that's just a little tip for you. Use less than you think and it'll probably be enough. Anyway, once I've got that all adhered down to my liking, just turn the card over there just to trim off those ends that were overhanging on both sides. Next up I'm going to use a technique that I used quite recently. It was inspired by Christina Werner on one of her not too recent cards now I suppose, but basically I'm using these little typewriter stamps. And I'm going to, excuse me, cut them out so they're like parallel little tablets if you like. And I'm just going to stick them to the bottom of that thanks topper. So the each individually spell out their words. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean in a minute when I start sticking it all down. So I'm starting at the end of the sentence because I want to make sure it's all going to fit properly and be spaced properly. And I'm just kind of sticking these to the back of this thanks sentiment, and I'm not putting them all on level, I'm deliberately making them higgledy-piggledy. And it just gives a nice effect. I really like this. I've used it before, as I say, and I will definitely use it again. And normally at this point I would stick this to the card using three-dimensional stickers, but as I say, because this card's going to Australia, I want to make sure that it's, you know, going to fit on the right size postage or whatever, and get through to her without being damaged. That's pretty much the card finished. All I went ahead and did now is corner rounded the bottom two corners. But aside from that, that's my thank you card for the lady we stayed with while we were in Australia. So that's today's card. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!